Next up, we have Gorka Irazoqui from Tanssi. Title of the talk is Fast Tracking Polkadot Developer Adoption with Tanssi, a game changer in Appchain development. Give him a round of applause, please.
All right. Is this working? Yeah. OK, cool. Hey, guys. Happy to be here. As the host said, my name is Gorka. We are building a project that is called Tanssi. Our goal with Tanssi is basically to fast track what we believe it's kind of a painful process, like building an app chain in general in today's ecosystem, but in Polkadot in particular, right? So, and why app chains? Well, we've detected that there's a significant growth on the amount of developers that want to have a very task-specific chain, that want to build a very task-specific chain. Indeed, that's what parachains are, right? So in the Polkadot's design, Polkadot's idea is that, right? That you focus on what you're good at building at, and then if you need something else, there will be probably another chain that will offer it to you, right? And that's actually our idea as well. And we've detected that a lot of developers have asked for this, right? So have this in mind, because it offers certain, certain benefits with respect to smart contracts or deploying rollups, for instance, right? So one of them is that you can obviously customize your platform, right, as you wish, right? So if we deploy a smart contract, we're tied to the fate of the smart contract platform in which we're deploying. If we're deploying in an L2, we might have or deal with a centralized sequencer. And in this case, we can choose and customize our needs however we need, right? So also, there's other use cases like, in the case of if the gas token, it's very clear because in the case of Ethereum, for instance, there's a single gas token that you can use unless you build with other protocols. But in this case, you could build your chain such that it accepts more than one token for gas. And in terms of decentralization and token utility, you can imagine new forms of giving your token a new utilities, right? And decentralization, obviously, because you could decide whether your block proposers are a set of centralized or decentralized validators, right? Now, the advantages are pretty clear, at least if you need them, but why are not people building more appchains, right? For us, I mean, we've built parachains, right? Myself, I worked for Moonbeam for the past 2 years before joining Tanssi, and we know what it takes to actually build a parachain, right? So it takes, first of all, you need to talk to RPC providers. You need to convince collectors to collect for your chain. You need to talk to indexers, wallets, whatnot, right? So all that stuff adds on top of even like building the runtime itself, right? And obviously, Polkadot has some great features like shared security that we get by becoming parachains or parathreads, but there's other ecosystems that don't even offer that, right? There's other systems in which you have to spin up your own validator set, which means that you might not get as secure chain as you wish, right? Not to mention cross-chain and bridge implementations, right? So again, Polkadot, we have the lack of having XCM and now soon Beefy to connect to Ethereum. But there's other chains in which, in order to build the chain, building a bridge actually takes the same amount of time as building the chain itself, right? So because you need the light client implementation of the other chain, of the receiving chain, this one might not be as secure as we wish as well. So there's certain caveats that we actually have to deal when we try to deploy an app chain. Now that's how Tanssi was born, and that's the idea of Tanssi is actually to actually facilitate all these problems and to actually solve most of these problems, right? But Tanssi will be, or it's not yet, but it's designed with the goal of being a parachain in Polkadot. Why in Polkadot and why a parachain? In Polkadot, it's quite easy. We said already that there's some concerns around the security that you might get by becoming an app chain. But obviously, Polkadot solves that by offering you shared security from the relay, so that's good, point one. Interoperability as well. So we know Polkadot has a very strong notion of interoperability in terms of security. So that's also something we guarantee. And by becoming a parachain and by letting appchains become parachains or parathreads, we know they are connected to the rest of the Polkadot ecosystem. But still, Tanssi will offer other things that are quite a pain in the ass as well when you deploy your own parachain. For instance, block production as a service, right? So we said that it might be hard to convince collectors and to design an incentive for collectors to actually produce blocks for your chain, right? So that's one of the things that Tanssi will offer, right? So Tanssi will see later the architecture, but Tanssi will offer block production as a service for app chains. Same with data retrievability, right? You need at least, for RPC providers to function, etc., you at least need some nodes that hold the entire history of the chain. That's also something that will be incentivized through Tanssi. And lastly, we know Substrate is a great technology, and we love Substrate, but it's true that for a newcomer to Polkadot, it might be hard to actually, it might take time to actually get used to Substrate, right? So we also offer assistance here in the form of templates that we have predefined and that people can use to deploy as they wish. So this is kind of the architecture that Tanssi was built, with which Tanssi was built. The first call that we need to make was whether, we had very clear that Tanssi was going to be a parachain, but what about the container chains, right? The container chains are these things in blue here. And we had to make the decision whether we adopted like a parent-child behavior with respect to Tanssi, which means that they would sit here, okay? Or we adopted a sibling-to-sibling kind of relationship with respect to Tanssi, which that's what the picture shows, right? We opted for the second one because, Polkadot has this notion of block space and execution cores. And if we build container chains like, above Tanssi, they would all be using the same execution core as Tanssi, which would limit the throughput that we can host, basically. And that's why we assume that each of the container chains will have their own execution core. Obviously, this is with parachains now. It's a bit not ideal because you need to win the auction, etc. That probably costs a lot of money. But with parathreads, this is gonna become much easier. So we're gonna assume that these two guys are parathreads. So with respect to Tanssi, Tanssi will have a set of collators pictured in yellow here that will get distributed to produce blocks for the container chains that have registered through Tanssi. Okay, and same with the data preservers. The data preservers are the nodes that are holding the history of the chain itself, right? So again, they will be incentivized to actually keep the history of the container chains. Now, adopting the sibling-to-sibling relationship has some problem or poses some issues, right? We still need the collators to be incentivized by Tanssi, right? So how do we know if it's another parachain or parathread? How do we know what's going on in the container chain, right? That's kind of difficult, right? So what we decided to do is take a look at what the relay chain does. And it turns out the relay chain does something very similar for XCM. Okay, so with XCM, when you send an XCM from one parachain to the other, what's happening is that the XCM messages are going to the relay, and then they're taken from the relay and injected into the parachain. And the collator is forced to do this, mandatory. Okay, it's mandatory to do this. Well, we thought, okay, we can do the same thing for the container chains, right? So in that sense, instead of the XCM messages, what we're taking from the relay is the latest head state or header, basically, of each parachain that is stored in the relay. Okay. So we can force the collators to basically inject something that we call this digest author here, that indicates the author that built the block for the container chain, if they want to get rewarded, right? So if collators want to get rewarded, they need to put this digest here, okay? And then whenever the next collator produces the block in Tanssi, it will read the header, the last header of the container chain. It will read this digest, and it has to prove to the Tanssi chain that is indeed the author that produced the block for the container chain. And if all this works, we can reward this author for producing the block. And the same happens in the opposite direction. Okay, so in a way, we cannot let anyone produce blocks in a container chain because that would be subject to a denial of service attack, right? So we cannot make it such that the container chain is open for anyone to propose blocks, right? That would be quite attackable, right? So instead, Tanssi holds what we call the Tanssi collator assignment, right? So the Tanssi collator assignment is basically a mapping between which collators are collating for Tanssi, which collators are collating for this container chain, and which others for the other container chain. So this is a storage item, right? So again, how can we prove to the container chain that these are the three authors that can produce a block for them? We do a very similar thing to what we did before, right? So again, the relay chain stores the latest header of each of the chains, including Tanssi, right? And the header has something that we call a storage root, right? So anything that is stored in Tanssi, you can prove, if you have the storage, you can make a proof against this storage root here. Okay? So what's happening is that collators are indeed, when producing a block, are forced to actually inject the authorities that are supposed to be building a block for this container chain. Okay? So this guy here, whenever it produces a block, it injects what we call the inherent authorities, which actually get stored in the container chain. This is a palette that we actually provide for container chains, and that's pretty much the only palette that they have to incorporate in order to work with Tanssi. So that's kind of how it works. But I mentioned also that we have something that we call templates, right? Which are basically runtimes that are already pre-built by us and have different functionalities. We imagine that there's certain palettes that. Hello? OK. So we imagine that there's certain palettes that will be common to all container chains, like obviously the denial of service author verification. That's the must. But there's others, right? Like XCM. Well, we know pretty well how to configure XCM because we've done it 100 times before. So why not provide a simple XCM configuration that container chains can actually adopt already? Maintenance mode, a palette that basically lets you put the chain in maintenance mode, so just in case you're under attack or whatever, right? Migration, same thing, right? So if you want to perform a migration, it takes a bit of time to understand migration. So we built a palette that actually eases this. So why not offer it as a must also for the old templates? And then we can imagine there will be additional templates, just with different use cases. The obvious one is CVM. This we know pretty well how to do because obviously Moonbeam was quite a pioneer on this. So yeah. Why not have an EVM template with all the Ethereum compatibility, 20 byte accounts, pre-compiled support, etc. Right? So in a way, you could be launching a mini Moonbeam through Tanssi, right? But there's freedom to build whatever we want, right? Like oracles, anything related with multisig, a democracy chain, whatever we want, right? So there's a lot of room for building templates yet. So this is how the ecosystem looks like right now. It's quite big, to be honest. I wasn't expecting it to be that big by now, but it's quite big. So yeah, most of these projects, especially those that wanna deploy through Tanssi, will be trying our next testnet release, which should happen soon this week or next week. So stay tuned for that. And our goal is basically to collect feedback and basically apply the feedback that they have. So with this, I wanted to show you a demo of how this works. So I'm going to actually close the presentation now. OK, so I hope you guys are familiar with Polkadot.js. It's basically the main explorer for Polkadot. And what we have here is this is a local setup. This is not a prod setup or anything. But we will just serve for the case that I want to picture. So we have a relay chain that is Irazoqui based. OK, we have Tanssi here. The testnet version of Tanssi is called Dancebox. That's why you see Dancebox there. And it's there's two chains that are running. And in Dancebox we have 4 collators right now. We will see it in this palette. You don't need to pay that much attention of where I'm clicking. But the important part is that we have 4 collators, right, that are collating right now for what we call the orchestrator chain. The orchestrator chain, it's Tanssi itself. Okay, there's no container chain registered, so we don't have anyone collating for container chains yet. So what we'll do is register a container chain and make sure that we can deploy the container chain in a less amount of time than what we suffered today. So for that, we have this DApp. Okay, should be fairly simple. The first thing that the DApp is gonna ask us is to connect a wallet. So Tanssi and the relay chain are obviously 32-byte addresses, so we have to use either Talisman or Polkadot.js. In this case, I'm going to use Polkadot.js. I'm going to use Alice, okay? Because I know it has funds in both chains, okay? So cool. We have Dancebox. We want to create an Appchain. So let's click it. And the first thing that the app is going to show us is whether we have balance in both chains. Okay, so we see that because we need, in order to register a container chain, we need to take actions on both chains, right? The relay chain and Dancebox. So in this case, we have balance for both. So I'm going to click continue. Okay, and the next thing the app asks for is to configure the template or to choose basically the template that we want to use. Again, right now we have 2 templates, the EVM one and the Substrate main one. You can provide your own here. If you wish. Just in case you do this, make sure that that it's compatible with Tanssi, okay? With these palettes that we mentioned that you need to avoid denial of service. So what we're going to do is configure the EVM template that we're going to deploy. In this case, I'm going to choose a random EVM chain ID. I'm going to name my token symbol, I don't know, Gorka talk, for instance. For the pseudo address, I'm going to pick the main Alif address that we usually see in testnet and so on, which is this one. And then I'm going to add balances to that account as well, like for instance this. I could add more things, like I could add some smart contracts already deployed in the Genesis. I don't want to do that right now. I don't think it's the scope of the demo. So I'm going to click continue. Okay. So cool. We selected the EVM template that we want to deploy in Tanssi. The first thing we need to do is reserve a parachain ID in this, or appchain ID in this case, right? So I'm going to click the button. And what's going to happen is that it will reserve a parachain ID here in the relay. We'll see in the next block. So in this case, you see the registrar reserved event here. It actually reserved the 2000 parachain ID for us. So this should soon say that we have the parachain ID 2000. All right. OK, so the next thing we need to do is we need to register the chain in both the relay and Tanssi. So we need to generate the specific specs to do so, right? So that's what this button generate does for you. It takes a bit of time. But obviously, I mean, I can go into what it does. It basically is going to register the Genesis WASM, the Genesis state in the relay, and some sort of Genesis state also in Tanssi as well. Let's go. This is the thing that takes most time. So, ironically, right? OK, so files have been generated. So let's click continue. So now we're ready to register the container chain. So I'm going to click register in the relay chain. Again, it's going to ask for my password because it needs to submit the transaction. Yes, and basically what we have seen is that in the relay chain, there's certain things that are happening here, right? So that means that we are sending the WASM to the relay chain. And that we are converting our parachain, sorry, our container chain to a parathread right now. So it takes 1 minute and 30 seconds. This usually takes more time in the Polkadot runtime, but we're in Irazoqui runtime, so that's as slow as 20 minutes. Okay, so this is our chain will become a parathread, right? So if parathreads were live, we could already work with a parathread and try to deploy a parathread in Tanssi. But that's not the case. We don't have parathreads yet live and functioning. Okay, so that's why after this process, what we'll have to do is convert this parathread into a parachain. Okay, and we'll have to do it with sudo, unfortunately. Okay, so it tells us that we registered. We're going to register in Tanssi as well. So let's do that. So let's see. OK, so I'm going to try to explain what will happen here. Yes. So again, the par ID has been registered in Tanssi. Obviously, we take a deposit from the sender. And what's going to happen is that right now, the chain has a notion that there's a container chain that wants to deploy. OK. So what will happen is at the next session, which should happen at block 125, collaborators should be already assigned or should have plans to be assigned to the new container chain. OK. So in the meantime, let's make this a parachain in the relay chain. We're going to use this palette here that allows us to do so. But again, this, whenever parathreads are live, we don't need to do this step. OK? All right. So again, we need 2 minutes for this to become a parachain. And then what I wanted to show you once the new session is here, hopefully in the, there you go. OK, so what I wanted to show you is that now in Tanssi, what will happen is that we will have that in the session number 26. Sorry, let's go a little bit down here as well. So in session 25, which is the current one, we have all the collators assigned to Tanssi, right? But in the next session, which is session 26, what will happen is that there's 2 collators that have been assigned to the container chain. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to open the container chain tab, which is this guy. Okay, it's deployed in this port. And we have it here, right? So that's our container chain. Obviously, still not producing blocks, but you can see it has all the EVM stuff right here. So it has all the EVM palettes here, right? So the EVM chain ID It is the one that we put, right? The sudo account, it's probably the one that we put as well. Let's see. Right? So, so all the things that we configured, the chain has been deployed with, okay? So the only thing that we have to check now is that this guy becomes a parachain, and the Tanssi collators are assigned to it, okay? So which should happen in session 26, which I think it's this one. So hopefully in a matter of 30 seconds, we should start seeing app blocks. One thing I didn't mention is that, well, actually I did mention it in the presentation, but I didn't mention it here in Polkadot.js, is that we need to keep track of who is the author of the container chain at every block that it produces, okay? Because otherwise we won't be able to reward him, okay? So for that, we have this palette that it's called author noting, and this will store the author of each container chain that we have registered once it starts producing blocks, okay? Okay, so it seems like we're about to produce blocks. Let's see. Let's wait until the 12 seconds. But that's it, right? So we have a container chain that we deployed, an EVM container chain, very much like Moonbeam, that we deployed in under 5 minutes. Okay, so that was kind of the goal, and that's how Tanssi can accelerate the deployment of these chains. Okay, and lastly, what I wanted to show you is the fact that Tanssi keeps track of who is the author of each block in the container chain, right? So this gets updated at every time we have a block. Let's see if we have another block. Yes. So this author keeps being updated because we need to reward this author, right, at every block. So we need to make sure that A, the chain advances, B, that we reward this author. And that's it. So essentially, that's the demo. If you want to reach out to us, I think I have a slide. So let me just go to the slide. And actually, yep. So yeah, I'm going to put the slide where we have the Discord and so on. Yeah, there you go. So basically, if you want to contact us, please feel free to do it through these channels. Through any of these channels, we'll reply as much. And if you wanna start building a container chain and try it out, just give us shoot us a message, and basically we can collaborate on helping you onboard the first container chain.
Okay, amazing. Thank you, Gorka. Has anyone got any questions about the Tanssi presentation there?
Cool.
Yes.
Does the shared collator set providing basically atomic composability for the container chains?
Yes, it does. Yes.
Cool. Any more questions? Yeah, one at the back.
Can you, first of all, thanks so much for your presentation. And can you foresee any sort of issues with interoperability with the Polkadot network? And do you think that both of them can sort of sit side by side with each other?
I think it's a good question, actually. So obviously, since our vision is that this should onboard more parachains or parathreads into the Polkadot ecosystem, we might have to change the way we see interoperability right now. So right now, the way we see interoperability is just that whenever you want one chain to talk to the other, what happens is that you open an HRMP channel with each of the chains you want to talk to, right? So I know there's, Assets Hub and Bridge Hub and so on are working towards having a central point with which you actually open an HRMP channel. And then you just connect to it, right? So that's it. You don't need to connect to anything else, right? So I think this should change. I think with the amount of change that this might bring, that Tanssi might bring, I think that's the direction we should go. Like, go everything through Assets Hub and Bridge Hub, and basically open a single HRMP with them. It might be useful still to open it with Tanssi, and we might provide like certain facilities to open it with Tanssi, but just with Tanssi.
The opening of HRMP channels is something like pretty painful,
yep.
even for many current parachains. Have you been considering maybe offering for the container chains ISMP palette from Polkadot Labs?
Yes.
Because if like basic other chains would have to deploy it on their own runtime, you could, or they could bypass basically opening the channels easily.
Yeah, no, we've considered it, and we've actually looked into the Polkadot palette quite heavily. We're considering two options: either go that route, or either provide another palette that basically at least facilitates the HRMP opening with respect to with certain conditions, like when you open it with Tanssi, if you're the manager of the chain or if you're the developer in charge of the chain, you can open it easily with Tanssi and so on. But I think we're considering one of those options. Yes.
Any more questions? No. In that case, thank you very much, Gorka. Really exciting stuff you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, one more time, round of applause for Gorka from Tanssi.
Thank you.